Hello, and welcome to Spirited Discussion, a Spirit Island podcast. Today, we have Episode 4, The Scenario Pitch. Hi there, I'm Kalen.
I'm Alex.
And today, we're going to be doing something a little different. I'm actually going to be challenging Alex to play some games of Spirit Island and then come back and tell me what he thinks.
I have to play Spirit Island?
Yeah, I know, you don't just get to talk about it.
But yes, we originally were thinking we'd cover adversaries sooner, but I don't know. A lot of people talk about adversaries, a lot of people play adversaries. There's not much chatter about the scenarios.
Yeah, and I honestly think that that's really unfortunate because I really like the scenarios, and I've played a fair amount of them, which is part of why I'm going to be now pitching Alex on my favorite scenarios.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenarios out there now, isn't there?
There are, and I will say that even as someone who enjoys scenarios, there are scenarios I do not enjoy, and we won't be talking about them in today's episode just because I'm limiting myself to my 5 favorite scenarios.
Okay. I guess to give a little preamble about my perspective on them and why I really haven't played them. I've only played Guard the Isle's Heart once, and it was like my 5th game of Spirit Island. It's just that there's rules overhead. You know, Spirit Island can be a complicated game as it is, especially with playing some of the more complicated spirits. And when you have to add just the fact that a lot of the basic rules of the game are just completely different, it can add a little bit more mental load. Now that I've played the game a ton, I'm definitely more open to doing it. I think I just default to adversaries, and part of it is just that I want to check off every adversary level with every spirit at some point. And looking at the scenarios, I'm like, oh, but that's not a part of my goals. That's something different. But I'm very much willing to try.
The scenarios are really very orthogonal to the adversaries. Some of them have weird interactions with individual adversaries, but being able to just tack a scenario onto a game with an adversary, I think, is actually part of what I like about them. Each of the 5 scenarios I'm going to be suggesting to you today has an adversary paired with it.
Ooh.
I'm not giving you any just plain scenarios,
Okay.
partially because I think you would crush them too easily and be bored, and partially because I think that the game will be a lot more interesting with some of the extra pressure that the adversaries bring.
Okay, that's fair. And I do want to just make a note, okay? This is how nerdy I am, is that I have been working on photoshopping basically all the rules of the adversaries on their own unique little piece of paper that I'm printing out with my thermal printer. So level 6 England will have all of the rules of level 6, but I'm doing it in the order of setup is going to be its own section, static rules that changes its own section, and then here's how the Ravage changes, here's how the build changes, here's how the Explore changes, here's what the escalation is. I'm trying to print them in a way that makes it very easy to remember the rules of all of these adversaries, instead of I'm playing level 5, so let me quickly scan the card up and down to see if that affects anything in the build or in the Ravage or whatever. So in doing so, I think I'll help myself a little bit with the rules for this.
Yeah, this is going to be pretty different in some ways in that you're going to be going against mostly mid-level adversaries, and the rules are going to be a little confusing, I think, because of that. Especially if you're more used to playing against the higher level adversaries or the full level 6 adversary. But it is something still that I think is going to be comprehensible. I don't think the rules overhead is going to be any worse for the most part than just playing a level 6 adversary. And the other thing is that we talked a little bit about how you're going to play these games. If you're playing them on the digital version, the app version, it's going to handle all the rules overhead for you.
Yes.
Which I found when I was prepping for this that could burn you a little bit, because at one point I forgot I was playing a scenario. I was just not doing anything to interact with it. And then I was like, wait a minute, why is this going so poorly? And I was like, oh, right.
Fair.
It was late at night. I was tired. There were reasons. Anyway.
Yeah. Recently they all went on sale, the digital version on Steam, all of the expansions except Jagged Earth and the base game. So I picked those up, and it's definitely not my preferred way to play, but I totally agree. With more complicated rules interactions like this, I probably will be playing most of these on the digital app.
Yeah.
So the breakdown of this episode is that Kalen's going to pitch me in the first part, and then I'm going to go away and play these, and then we're going to come back in the second part, and I'm going to talk about my opinions.
Yeah. So in pitching them to you, I am going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk about the literal rules changes that the scenarios introduce. But I'm also going to talk a little bit about strategic theory around what that changes about the game. And I don't want to go too much into it because I don't want to spoil anything for you. I want you to be able to explore it and either have fun or be disappointed on your own as you are. But I do want to try and give you a little sense of what I enjoy about it and why I picked the adversary I did.
Okay.
So with that, let's hop to our first scenario. First scenario I'm going to suggest to you is a classic. It is Blitz. Blitz is a scenario that is notably harder for slow developing spirits, and if you paired with Brandenburg Prussia. Guess what adversary you're pairing it with? You're pairing it with Brandenburg Prussia.
Woo!
So, scenario Blitz, what it does is all powers are made fast. Powers which were already fast or are made fast, for example, by Lightning Swift Strike's special rule, cost 1 less energy. Or if they're made fast, they can refund an energy. This does allow powers to have a negative cost. So some powers will cost -1 in this scenario.
Does that mean I'll get that money back or that energy back?
Yes. So
Whoa.
So you play the card and you take an energy from the bank when you play it, basically.
Weird.
Yeah, it's kind of funky, but it ends up being pretty intuitive, I find, once I'm about a turn into the game.
Okay.
Then the invaders get an advantage. When exploring, once per board, you add an additional explorer. So one of the 2 lands you explore will get 2 explorers. Or if you're in stage 3, one of the 4 lands will get an additional explorer. Or if coastal lands comes up, one of the 3 lands.
Okay.
Additionally, if the island becomes blighted, you get 1 less blight per player on the blight card.
Oh.
But the reason for that is during setup, you're going to start with an extra blight on the blight card per player. But the invaders are also going to get an additional set of actions at the end of setup. So setup consists of explore, build, explore. And turn 1, there will be a ravage.
Okay. Interesting. Obviously, these games go very fast.
Well, not always. I find these Blitz games sometimes can go long. It's more about how it changes the way that powers work and interact.
Okay.
Some of the interesting things that happen are because fast powers are made cheaper, most spirits end up being able to play a lot more bottom track strategies. They manage to afford majors much more easily. And there's a lot of interesting gameplay that comes out of that.
Okay.
Lightning Swift Strike is kind of interesting in this one because it makes, slow powers fast. And so Lightning can actually, just as a slight spoiler, I'm not actually going to suggest Lightning to you, but if you want to play it, you can. Lightning can turn 1 play Shatter Homesteads, and then turn 2 be able to afford all 3 of its remaining cards.
Oh.
Because everything is made cheaper. And so its hand, instead of costing 6, costs 2.
Interesting. And it takes away the part of the puzzle of the game that is kind of planning for the next turn. You're instead just playing basically just for the now.
A little bit, but there is still... planning for the future in Spirit Island is always good, even if there isn't a slow phase.
Fair. That's fair.
The other thing that I will say here is that I'm going to suggest to you that you play it with 1 spirit, and I'm going to suggest that you play it with one of 3 different spirits.
All right.
A spread of Rampant Green, Thunderspeaker, or Eyes.
Ooh. Okay.
Now, part of the reason for that is you can actually get value out of a defend card on turn 1. Or a defend innate.
Oh.
And so those 3 spirits are all going to do interesting things. And I don't know if I actually said which level. Brandenburg Prussia, I'm going to suggest you play level 3.
Okay.
Which is going to give you a official paper difficulty of 6 for this game.
Okay. Yeah, that's a nice spot.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty interesting. You're gonna, because of the extra action during setup, the invaders are going to be starting with a stage 3 card, Explore, on turn 1. But you're not going to be getting hammered completely right out of the gate.
Okay. I dig it. Sounds like a fun scenario. Sounds like not too much rules overhead too. Like it changes things, but it doesn't change things in a way that's kind of obtuse. Like it makes sense. Like everything is themed around one thing.
Absolutely. So, then scenario 2, we're going to get really obtuse.
Yeah.
Scenario 2 that I'm going to suggest to you is Elemental Invocation. Now, Blitz was a scenario from the base box. Elemental Invocation came out with Jagged Earth. For this one, I'm going to suggest that you pair it with the Habsburg Livestock Colony, also from Jagged Earth, at either level 2 or 3, depending on how you're feeling about it. Again, on paper, this gives you a difficulty 6 or 7 game. And the reason that this is going to be a little interesting is that Elemental Invocation has an asterisk on its difficulty.
Oh.
Recommendations and notes for it say, this scenario magnifies the effects of experience. Veteran players may find it +0 difficulty, or easier, especially with explosive early game spirits, while new players may find it +2 or +3 difficulty.
Okay.
So this scenario is all about elements. Once per spirit phase, each spirit may pay energy to place an element marker on the corner of one of their lands, i.e. at the intersection of 3 to 4 lands, or of 1 or more lands and the ocean or the board edge. Each corner can only hold 1 element marker, and they are permanent. The cost is 1 energy, plus an energy for each adjacent corner that already has an element marker. You can only place element markers which you have the element on a power card, either in your hand, in play, or in your discard pile. And this isn't relevant for digital, but if you somehow run out of a type of element marker, use a substitute piece. So the benefit of these element markers: when using a land targeting power, the power gains all elements on the target land's corners, so elemental thresholds can be reached more easily when targeting certain lands.
Oh.
Each element on the board counts as 2 energy towards choice events, aided by that element. However, element markers do not help spirit targeting powers or special rules that check how many elements you have, such as lightning swift strikes, swiftness of lightning. If you have an air marker on the board, it doesn't let you speed up an extra power.
Can't make it too easy.
In order to balance this out, each board is going to start with an extra town in land 6. You're going to add a fear card to terror level 1, and you're going to accelerate this invader deck, which is you take the topmost card of the lowest invader stage and discard it. So, we're pairing this with Habsburg Livestock Colony. Reason for that is Habsburg Livestock has a lot of towns, and this is going and builds extra towns inland if you let them build inland. And so this is going to quickly get out of hand if you aren't able to keep up with it.
Okay.
Additionally, they have lots of fear cards in their deck, and so that's tricky. And if you play Habsburg level 3 rather than level 2, they're already going to get rid of a stage 1 card. So that means that accelerating it for Elemental Invocation will give you a stage 2 card with a probable escalation on turn 1.
Okay.
So again, trying to give you some challenge there, some very different gameplay in that sense. This is kind of like what you might get if you were doing a double adversary between like Habsburg and Brandenburg Prussia. But it is still going to end up feeling, I think, fairly distinct.
Okay. Yeah, this is definitely different.
Yeah. So about the strategy for this one, the main thing that this scenario breaks open is innate powers. It also breaks major powers, but you start with your innates, and so if you have the ability to, for example, get innate to a higher level 1 turn earlier than you normally would be able to, or on turn 1 instead of turn 2, you can do amazing things with that. And it just gives the player so much extra ability to do interesting things. You get to use different growth patterns because of that. One of my favorites with this, which I'm not going to suggest this spirit for this game, is Shadows Flicker Like Flame. Placing down a moon marker can get its innate power off of a single card and allow you to actually grow on your top track early game and have some energy income, which is kind of nice. I think it's a really interesting scenario. I wish it was a little... I wish it played better with some of the other adversaries. Against, I think, France in particular, it's kind of obnoxious to have the extra town. Well, and against England, too. So a couple of them have problems with that. But it's still a very interesting scenario. Okay. And for this one, I'm going to suggest that you try a solo game. And the 3 spirits I'm going to suggest are River Surges in Sunlight, Sunbright Whirlwind, and Devouring Teethlurk Underfoot.
Okay.
I'll let you figure out why those are the ones I'm suggesting.
All right. Interesting.
The third scenario we're going to talk about is Dahan Insurrection.
Oh.
Dahan Insurrection, I feel like, is better known than a lot of other scenarios, at least among people who play the digital version, because there's an achievement for winning a game at difficulty 17, and you can only do that by playing with the Dahan Insurrection.
Difficulty 17?
Yes, difficulty 17.
Oh no!
If you turn all the knobs up to maximum on the digital version, right now the max you can get to is 17.
Wow. Okay.
That number will increase, and also it's not difficulty above about 11 or 12 is really hard to scale, because the things that allow you to get above difficulty 11 or 12 are really kind of strange in how they interact with each other.
Okay.
And so the idea of like a scenario plus an adversary is as difficult as the both of them put together is not entirely accurate. So Dahan Insurrection is ostensibly difficulty 4.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean it's always +4 difficulty if you play it with an adversary.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Also, these numbers are very, they're very nebulous. They're the best that they can be applied to the situations, but depending on your spirit or I don't know, skill or whatever, I feel like they're not always truly representative. It's just the best they can do.
Yeah, experience level is really hard to calibrate, especially for people who are really used to the game. If you're regularly winning games at difficulty 10, the difference between probably about difficulties 0 and 5 is probably negligible for you. Mm-hmm. But for someone who's playing around difficulty 3, that difference is huge.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that they put the difficulty levels on there. It's just so hard to nail that down in such a open and free game that this is.
Yeah. So, Dahan Insurrection. After a bit of digression.
Sorry, I don't mean to insurrect your pitch. Continue.
Oh, we're going to get a military response for that one. Okay.
Oh, boy.
So the rule changes for Dahan Insurrection. First one is constant rating. After an action moves one or more Dahan, each Dahan that moved deals 1 damage in the land that they moved to. So often, I think new players tend to make mistakes and assume that the Dahan get to actually deal damage other than counterattacks. This scenario, you actually do get to do damage when the Dahan move.
Ah.
So then the balance to this is military response. Whenever a city is destroyed, add a town to the nearest land with Dahan. Whenever a town is destroyed, add an explorer to the nearest land with Dahan.
Oh.
So if you have a land with a city and you push 3 Dahan into it, you destroy that city. Great. But then they get a town in that same land.
Okay. This seems a little nuts.
It is amazing. Then coordinated insurrection. If you reach terror level 4 or terror level victory, Dahan immediately damage invaders in every land on the board as if they were fighting back after a ravage. If this doesn't fulfill the victory condition, you lose. So if you empty the fear deck, you can actually lose this game if you don't set up properly. Because the victory condition, the normal fear-based victory is not available. Instead, at Terror 2, when there are no lands where buildings outnumber Dahan, you win the game.
Huh.
And then Terror 3, you win if there is fewer than 1 land per player where buildings outnumber Dahan. Which, there's a weird little signpost error with that, where in solo, that's equivalent to Terror 2. It's fewer than 1 land per player, rather than less than or equal to 1 land per player.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm going to suggest that you play this one 2-handed, play 2 spirits. So if you get to Terror 3, you're going to be allowed 1 land on the entire board where there are not at least as many Dahan as buildings.
Okay. Interesting.
Then there is 1 additional loss condition, which, if it comes up, you're probably losing anyway, which is, if there's fewer than 2 Dahan per player left alive, you lose the game.
Well, I mean, duh.
Yeah. But you can't just, clear the board and then have no Dahan. So if you cast down, it's not actually a victory.
Ah. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense flavorfully. Okay, interesting.
So for this one, my suggestion is that you play it alongside Sweden. Okay. And the main reason for that is that Sweden has a lovely escalation ability that converts Dahan into towns. And so, because military response is going to be sticking plastic all over the board in your lands with Dahan, and every time they explore at stage 2, you're under threat to lose those Dahan, it's going to add a lot of tension to the game.
Okay.
On the flip side, Sweden is very weak to direct damage early on, and so if you can just get ahead of them, you'll probably wipe the floor with them.
Okay.
Because if you can move a bunch of Dahan around, they just destroy all the buildings and all the explorers, and the game ends. And it's pretty fast.
All right.
As for level, I suggest Sweden 3 or Sweden 4, which is going to get you a paper difficulty of 9 or 10.
All right.
This is one that I would recommend playing at least 2 spirits, or exactly 2 spirits for the sake of this episode. And the suggested spirits I have for you are Wildfire, Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares, Shadows Flicker Like Flame, Lightning Swift Strike, and Thunderspeaker. If you really want to cheese it, play Thunderspeaker.
Yeah.
If you don't really want to cheese it, don't play Thunderspeaker.
Yeah, I probably... Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But, yeah, I could definitely see how Thunderspeaker could make this a lot easier.
The other thing I'll mention to you is Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares. When it moves Dahan, those Dahan deal real damage. If you play Veil the Night's Hunt on Bringer of Dreams and Nightmares and push 3 Dahan, you get to destroy a city for real. You don't just generate 5 fear and leave the city there.
That's awesome.
So that is the main reason it is on the list, is because I love Bringer in this scenario. It just feels so different and just adds a whole new dimension to the game.
Okay. Yeah, this seems very interesting. I really appreciate that they went out of their way to just make there be these bizarre ways to play the game. I don't know. It's not a lot of games do this. I mean, there's modules and stuff that games have, but there's not a lot of games that try to really fundamentally change, like, how the game is played or just how it works. And I think that's really cool, even if it's not always my cup of tea.
Yeah. So, the fourth scenario I'm going to suggest to you is Ward the Shores. Ward the Shores has a couple of rule changes. Once per turn, each spirit may play a power card face down as if it were a slow power that targets at range 0 from a sacred site and costs 0 energy. The effect of the power is pay 2 energy per blight and 2 energy per building in the land you're targeting to add a warding pattern. A warding pattern is a special marker that grants defend 3 in its land, and that warding pattern is destroyed anytime the land it's in is blighted, or blight is added to it.
Okay.
If you can add them to a blighted land. You're allowed to have 4 warding patterns per player. The normal Fear Victory, again, is not available. So for this one, if you get to Terror 2+, and you have a warding pattern in every coastal land, you win the game.
Okay.
The last change to this scenario is the Stage 3 Surge. During Stage 3, Explorer adds a town in addition to an Explorer. So, obviously, this means I needed to pair it with France, because if you hit Stage 3, you're going to be adding 4 towns per board. You'll only be playing France 2, which gives you a paper difficulty of 7. This is basically going to be a very tight clock. Is you need to get the warding patterns down, you need to keep the island from, blighting out or losing in the usual way. But you also almost certainly need to win before Stage 3 hits.
Interesting.
If you do get to Stage 3, you might survive, but probably not.
Okay.
Because 4 towns per board is a lot.
And the fear cards are still set up like usual, even though Fear Victory is not a thing.
Oh, yeah. I don't actually... Okay, I'm using the wiki here to check it. Oh, there it is. I don't have the actual card in front of me, but yes, after making the fear deck, put all remaining fear cards on the bottom. If they run out, reshuffle the deck. Okay. So, yeah, you can theoretically earn as many Terror 3 fear cards as you can, or as you want to, but you don't get a Fear Victory for getting through them all.
So we've got some very brave invaders in this scenario.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're trying. They're so brave that you need to literally create warding patterns on the shoreline to stop them from finding the island again.
Because they will just keep coming. Okay, got it. So obviously I'm playing this with lore, right?
Lure is not the one I would suggest.
Yeah.
Lure of the Deep Wilderness is very difficult to win this scenario with, although I am suggesting you play it with 2 spirits, so maybe if you really wanted to try, you could do that.
Okay.
But the 5 spirits I think would be fun for you to do it with would be Sharp Fangs Behind the Leaves, Many Minds Move as 1, Shadows Flicker Like Flame with the Reach aspect, if you really want to cheese things.
Okay.
Fathomless Mud of the Swamp, and Lightning Swift Strike with the Wind aspect. So those scenarios have a mixture of mobile presence and other things that let them ignore range restrictions. Okay. And so they're all going to have a much easier time getting sacred sites or sacred sites near the coast that they can then use to target the warding patterns.
Okay.
If you want a bigger challenge, play something like Lure. Or play something like Wildfire that's going to have a horrible time getting sacred sites on the coast.
Right. Okay. Interesting.
Finally, the fifth scenario I'm going to suggest to you is Guard the Isle's Heart, which you said you've played once.
Just once, yeah.
And this one, you are going to be playing it, if you choose to play it, alongside England level 6.
Oh, okay.
There is an additional caveat. You may or may not, you can ignore this caveat if you want. You will, if you do choose to play Guard the Isle's Heart with England level 6, my challenge to you is win at Terror level 1.
What?
Win at Terror level 1.
I mean, I heard you. I just...
So this is one where I'm going to suggest you play it solo.
Okay.
I should read what Guard the Isle's Heart actually does. Yeah. Guard the Isle's Heart. There's an inner land on each board. For a solo game, it's going to be land 7. After all other setup, you remove all towns from the island. In each inner land, you add a presence from the player starting on that board and an explorer. If you're playing Ocean, which you shouldn't, you add the presence to the nearest legal land instead.
I love all the exceptions they gotta make for Ocean every time.
Yeah, it's amazing. Each spirit starts with 2 additional power cards by drawing a single card from each of the minor and major decks. And then there's an additional loss condition. Anytime after turn 1, if there is a town or a city in your inner land, you lose.
Huh. Okay.
So the thing here is that if you can manage your inner land really well, you're probably going to be able to do really amazing things against England because they will not get 2 of their towns that they're used to starting with. Okay. If you can't manage your inner land, you're going to just lose.
All right.
For this one, the spirits I'm suggesting you play, because, again, this is England 6, and so we really want to bring out the big guns here.
Got it, yeah.
I want you to try it with Vital Strength of the Earth.
Okay.
River Surges in Sunlight, who is notoriously bad against England. Or Sharp Fangs Behind the Leaves, who is very good against England.
Are you saying true solo for this, or just...
True solo, yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you want to do the Terror Level 1 challenge. The Terror Level 1 challenge is a thing that some friends and I came up with at one point, and I believe it's possible for most, if not all, spirits, with the exception of Bringer in Dreams and Nightmares.
Okay. Well, I gotta try it if I pick this one. I gotta try it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, yeah.
So those are the 5 scenarios that I'm going to suggest to you. Guard the Isle's Heart, I guess I didn't talk about like strategic implications much. You start with an extra presence on the board and 2 extra cards in hand. You're super overpowered. Try to win as fast as you can, or it's going to get really, really dicey.
Okay. Well, all right then. I gotta say, after you talked about all of these, I think scenarios were a mistake, and they should just delete them from the game. You did a terrible job pitching these. I refuse to play any of these. No, you did a great job, and you made them all sound very interesting. I will be picking 3 of these. I will definitely be playing with spirits that you suggest, and we'll see how it goes. I'll be playing at least 1 game of each of these, maybe more if I lose or if I'm really feeling it. And yeah.
Well, and some of these might go really fast if the scenario rules just get ahead of you and suddenly everything falls apart.
Yeah, I guess more so than a lot of other things in this game. I think I might need to just play a test game that I'm probably going to lose just to even kind of wrap my head around it. It's, you described it all. I'm looking at the rules here and I'm like, I just got to kind of like see it to get it, you know?
So do you think you have 3 that you want to play now, or do you want to go into that when we come back after the break here?
I am going to surprise you when we come back.
Sounds good.
All right, let me go play some Spirit Island.
Yeah, I'm going to put these scenarios and all the suggestions I have in the description for this episode. So anyone who wants to try and do some of these on their own before you get back and hear what Alex thinks about all of them, please go ahead and try them out. I honestly think all of these are fun. I've been playing these games for the last 2 or 3 days to get ready for this episode, and I've been having a blast.
All right, yeah, definitely try out something you maybe you've never tried before. So thank you so much for these suggestions, Kalen. And yeah, I'm gonna get to playing some Spirit Island.
All right, let's do it. And we are back. I feel like I just talked a lot, but it's also been a little while real time since we recorded the first part of this because, Alex needed time to play some games.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to this second half, and I'm gonna shut up for a while now and let Alex talk.
Okay, hello. So you suggested some scenarios with some very specific adversaries and spirits and spirit counts and everything, and I played some games. So the first one I want to talk about was I did Scenario 1 Blitz with Brandenburg Prussia 3 with one spirit, and I chose... You want to guess which spirit I picked?
I suggested green Thunderspeaker and eyes, and I'm not actually sure which one of those I would expect you to pick. Like, I don't know enough about your preferences still.
That's fair. I picked eyes. I have a decent experience with eyes and Thunderspeaker, and I felt like green would be too cheesy, and I've played Thunderspeaker quite a bit. But eyes, I have like some experience, but not a ton of experience, and I wanted to go in with, hey, low complexity spirit, nice and easy into all this. So yeah, I won the game. It was fun. I quite enjoyed it. It really didn't mess with how I played all that much. It kind of gives you a little bit more to think about. It gives you that nice energy refund, and I appreciate that it made that Boon of the Watchful Guarding like pay for itself, basically.
Yeah.
It's a card that you can, I believe it's either defend 4 or defend 8 if you pay 1 energy. Something like that.
Yeah, but in Blitz you get the discount, and so instead of costing 0, it costs -1.
Yep. So that's pretty sweet. Yeah, it's just a nice experience. I definitely would play Blitz again. I feel like it's one of those scenarios that it definitely changes the game up, but it's not like a whole bunch of different rules text to remember or to conflict with an adversary or something. So I would definitely be for playing Blitz with like other adversaries or Brandenburg Prussia at a higher level.
I'm curious, how did you play the game? Did you play it physically? Did you use the app version?
That's a good question. Yeah, no, I used the app on Steam, and it all worked very well. It's nice that it just gives you the refund of energy. You don't have to specifically remember to do that. They do a good job on the app of really just trying to make everything as friendly and easy as possible, and I find that helped a lot, whereas I could see in person forgetting to give yourself the extra energy. Or the discount. It's not always extra energy. Sorry, a discount or extra energy.
Yeah, I mean, I've played Blitz in person a few times, and the number of times that I've had a fascinate and I forget whether I've given myself the energy for using it or not is too many for me to count. And sometimes I've double paid myself, sometimes I've not paid myself at all, and it just, yeah, I really appreciate the app for that, which is sort of why I was wondering how you did it.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. But I did like that Blitz feels like the game's different, but it doesn't feel like I have to remember a ton of things, and I don't feel like I played it really that much differently than I would have. Obviously, some of the cards that I picked, when drafting powers, changed based upon getting them to do them all fast. But otherwise, I don't feel like the game was changed in a significant way, which in my opinion is kind of a positive thing.
So I'm curious too, so was your it sounds like your build for eyes was pretty similar to what you would normally do in a regular game of Spirit Island.
Yeah.
Did you find any changes to like wanting to go on a different track more or any of that?
Not really. I feel like Eyes' strat is pretty, I don't want to say pretty simple, but pretty laid out, where you defend, you pull Dahan in, you let the Dahan do your dirty work. That's Eyes in a nutshell.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed that one at least. I definitely had some trepidation going into this about have I just like consigned Alec to some extreme boredom and stress, and he's going to come back and say, "Oh, this was a terrible idea, Kalen. Why did you ever suggest it?"
So the next one I played.
We get to the next scenario.
Yes. So I decided to play Ward the Shores.
Ah!
Yes.
I can imagine some reasons why this might have gone poorly, but I'd like to hear now.
So Ward the Shores, you decided to pick France 2 to play with it, and 2 spirits to play. I picked Fangs and Mud, because, again, those were spirits that I've had more experience with in general. And Kalen, I played this 3 times.
Oh no.
I lost 3 times. I hated this. This was awful. This was a rough experience, dude. It's not your fault. It's not your fault necessarily, but I did not play a third scenario because I got so frustrated with this that I'm just like, I can't devote any more of my time to doing this because all the other ones you also suggested were like equal or higher difficulty. So
tell me a little bit about the losses. So you played it 3 times.
Yep.
Did you always lose to town limit? Did you blight out? What kind of things went wrong?
I lost to town limit, I believe, all 3 times. I recorded the playthrough. I will not be uploading this. No one needs to see my shame. But I recorded it just so that I can refer back to it now. Yeah, so basically 2 of them I lost, like, I don't want to say quickly. Like, it wasn't like turn 2 or 3, but I lost relatively quickly. Like, I don't feel like I got to terror level 2. And one of the games I did go pretty decently long into. I did learn a little bit as I played. Like, for instance, the first game, I really was not warding the shores at all. And when I played the second and third times, I tried harder to ward the shores as much as possible and as early as possible. Obviously, that is cheaper to do so because there's, you pay extra for the blight and the towns and cities, or maybe just the cities.
Towns and cities, yeah.
Towns and cities, yeah. So I did learn, and I was kind of getting there, but the thing that got me the most, dude, and this is honestly just a fun thing, is I did not have fun trying to keep track of 2 spirits, which is not, it's like a little out of my wheelhouse playing more than 1 spirit at a time. I know a lot of people do it. It's not my favorite thing to do. That plus France is the most, you have to track stuff spirit or adversary in the whole game, because and when I say you have to track it, I don't mean, like, obviously the app lays out how many towns you could still place, but you still have to look and see, okay, the adversary is gonna, add an extra town here because of this, or, whatever. You have to track that. You have to track where the
Slave Rebellion card is, or else it comes up and, hey, it's useless. Great.
Not useless, but, you didn't make full use of it, and I feel like you really need that card. So you have to track all that stuff. I had 2 spirits, and then on top of that, the scenario, which, not a super complicated scenario, but it does add more complexity, and I don't know, man, I just didn't have fun.
Yeah, I hear that. And I'm looking back at this now, and I'm thinking that as much as I enjoy Ward the Shores plus France, like, this maybe was a very poor suggestion to suggest these 2 together. Because did you hit stage 3 in any of them, or did the town limit hit you before that?
I hit stage 3 in one of them, just barely, but okay. I was pretty overrun. I didn't have it. I had like 1 or 2 wards down. Like, I was still not close to victory.
Gotcha. Yeah, this is one where, so Ward the Shores for me is sort of the abandon the inlands scenario in some ways. And having played maybe a bunch of it, I'm like, oh, with France, it's a fun challenge because it puts you on this timer and it says, oh, well, how do you handle the inland so that you don't get too many towns and that kind of thing. But I'm realizing now, talking to you about it, I probably just gave you an utterly miserable challenge just because there's too many weird synergies between France and the Ward the Shores scenario where it's just going to make the game really, really hard. Potentially, because I think it said difficulty 7. This was probably one of the higher difficulty ones on here. Like, I think this was probably harder than the Dahan Insurrection one, which would technically be 9 to 10. I don't know what the exact difficulty would be, and maybe with more practice at either France or Ward the Shores, it might go back down to that, but still, like, as a learning and an introduction to scenarios, yeah, I'm a little regretting now that this is the one I chose for you.
Well, that's the thing, is that it didn't necessarily feel to me like it was like, this is
so impossibly difficult I couldn't beat this. It felt just I wasn't having fun. I do not find it fun to constantly have to look at the adversary card to remember everything that France is doing. I mean, you didn't put a high level of France, but still, between the loss condition, the acceleration, the 2 stages, and then the extra rules on the scenario, it's just like, I just did not have fun. I'm sorry. I wish I did.
No. how much of the not having fun do you feel like was the scenario making France worse, or just France not being an adversary you like very much? I guess I don't know what your opinions on France are, and we haven't really done an adversary episode yet. But without going too much into it, is France one that you just dislike, or is it more that?
So France makes me feel like a baguette. Because no, no. I honestly, France is one of those adversaries that, man, I like the concept of it. I think the idea of limiting towns is just like a cool concept. In execution, it's just a real pain. You have to remember that, like, I generally play with another person, and I feel like some of the load bearing, I guess, like removing towns and thinking about towns and splitting up board thoughts and stuff like that is kind of put off of me, whereas in this game I was just completely in charge of all of that. So I'm pretty mixed on France. I don't like vehemently hate it, but I also do feel like it is in the upper levels of like complexity of like what I want to deal with. And then yeah, like I said, adding that to the amount of spirits, which is not the scenario's fault, but just something that I struggle with my focus dealing with two of those spirits. And then I also should say, to compound this situation, I think maybe playing digitally was a mistake, because it's very easy to just not check the adversary card, to just kind of forget about it for a little bit, even though I know it tracks the towns easily. The other stuff that it does, it's just like I wasn't constantly looking at it, and I lost probably because of that, really. There was at least one game that I just lost without really even realizing it. Like, I was just kind of like, that's it? Like, it's over?
I'm kind of tempted here to, well, I mean, obviously we're gonna not worry about doing any more scenarios for this episode, but I'm kind of tempted here to suggest that if you're up for it, I think it might be fun to go back and not play Ward the Shores, because obviously this was a really bad experience for you, and I don't want to like keep hammering this one scenario.
Yeah, play it until you win.
Play it until you win, Alex.
Yeah.
You gotta do it. No, what I was gonna say is the other scenario that I'd suggested doing a 2-player or a 2-handed game with was the Dahan Insurrection, that I said is difficulty 9 to 10 on paper, but I think is easier than that. I'm curious if you'd be up for maybe trying to actually have like the two of us play that sometime and maybe talk through it a little more.
Yeah.
I think that might actually be a little more fun, and hopefully, I think the Dahan Insurrection plus Sweden doesn't have as many pain points as Ward the Shores plus France does.
Yes.
And so I don't think you'd be as likely to hate it. You might still not like it. And that's totally fair. Like, one of the advantages of this game is that these scenario game modes are totally optional.
I feel bad because, I make the joke about like scenarios were a mistake. We're not playing them. I hate them. But from my experiences so far, yeah, I don't hate scenarios, but I do just think that like maybe it's just an extra level of complexity that I just don't want to deal with. And as you mentioned, it's an issue because if I were to just play the scenario without an adversary, it probably would be too easy. Like, Ward the Shores in and of itself, at a base level, yeah, that doesn't look like a problem at all. It looks very easy, and in fact, it looks easier than the main game, because of the easy defense.
Yeah. I think some of it, too, might be that we haven't talked too much about, like, how many games of Spirit Island we've each played that much. But this is one of those things where I think that scenario started appealing to me a lot more after playing hundreds of games of Spirit Island. And some of that was that changing the rules up with the scenarios became a lot more appealing once the base game had occasionally gotten stale and I was feeling some burnout. And scenarios are what got me back into the game when that happened. And so I have this like almost nostalgia for them that I don't imagine you would have had the need for that yet with your Spirit Island journey.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at about 100 games, a little over that at this point, but it's true. And it's something that I kind of did want to talk to you about that we could spend a little bit more time in this episode talking about, is just we are at different levels of Spirit Island. And also, I get the sense from talking to you that you are a more technical player than I am. I do play a little bit on vibes. Now, I'm a pretty analytical person in general, but I just don't think that I'm at the level that you are. And so I don't know. I was a little worried coming into this because I didn't tell Kalen that I didn't even make it to 3 scenarios. I was just like, hey, I played some of the assignment and I got some stuff to talk about. But I was a little worried coming into this that I'm gonna say this and you're gonna be like, wow, you're an idiot. You couldn't even do this? Like, come on. Like, everyone plays with 2 spirits at once. What are you fool?
Oh. No. Everyone. Part of the beauty of this game is that it has so much modularity and so much ability, I think, to work at different levels and at different skills and experiences. And I just something I want to say. I don't know if I can find the comment ever again, but one time I remember someone talking about watching people play Spirit Island on YouTube, and I assume I was one of the people they were talking about. And their comment was something like, "Yeah, it's like watching some kind of optimized AI algorithm decision-making machine, like just sort of go through and like make decisions with no clear explanation as to why." And I think that some of that is that I actually do feel like I play somewhat on vibes as well. But
Really?
I also have spent so much time on this game that what my vibes are based off of having like, oh, I've been in this situation 15 times or 15 close similar situations. And sort of, I just...
You reflexively know what to do.
I have some more reflexes built in. And when I do need to then get technical, I'm spending that energy on different parts of the problem. I'm not necessarily needing to think as much about what card I'm going to draft. I'm thinking about whether I'm going to play it this turn or next turn instead.
Right. Well, I slightly funny anecdote. We were chatting about on Discord, just in messages about the podcast, and while we were doing that, I was actually playing a physical game with my wife, and I just sent you a picture just for fun, just like, yeah, we're playing Habsburg, the second Habsburg, and you immediately were like, oh, board D7 is looking a little risky over there. Like, immediately, without like missing a beat, your brain went into how do I solve this Spirit Island game, and I'm just like, wow, that's like really impressive.
I mean, I think it's just that like I like to pitch one framework for the game that a guy named Fyandor came up with, where you think about basically threats, blockers, and I'm forgetting all the parts of the framework. Now I feel bad. I'll link it in the description. But it's a really good way of thinking about the game. And one of the things you do is the first thing you do when you look at a board is say, hey, where are you about to lose? And in that screenshot, there was one land that I was like, oh, that's going to trigger a loss condition almost immediately. And so that's sort of where that came in. Is it's not like, oh, I know exactly what's going on in this game or anything like that, which, I mean, there are some of those things that you can pick up on with enough practice, but I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's cool. And I mean, it's also tricky because I'm in a place where, like, obviously I do want to get better at Spirit Island, but I don't want to ruin the fun of the game by turning it into like a homework assignment. You know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
I want to look at tips on Reddit. I want to, talk to you and experience. But what I don't want is to, like, read 20-page dissertations on how to play a spirit. Just me personally. Some people are into that, and that's totally fine. But this game is fun for me, and doing that's not fun. So I want to kind of level up organically, if that makes any sense.
It makes complete sense. And honestly, that is the approach that I will endorse to anyone getting into this game. And I will also say, though, that even if you're someone who does like doing those guides and things like that, Spirit Island is such a deep game that I've seen people going on the Discord and being like, hey, is there a guide for this spirit? And the response is, well, this person's writing one, or not yet.
Yeah.
Or someone wrote a guide 5 years ago and,
yeah, this expansion changed it. Like, yeah. I'm waiting for my dissertation to be peer reviewed, actually, so I can't share it yet.
Yes, exactly. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there is so much. There's so many different ways to experience this game, and I don't think any of them are wrong. Or I haven't encountered one that's wrong yet. I don't know. Maybe War of the Shores with France was a bad idea.
I don't know that it was.
Other than that,
I don't know that it was specifically War of the Shores. And I mean, again, I fully admit a lot of these experiences, and it's not your fault, are completely new to me. Playing digitally is a new experience to me. Playing with more than one spirit at a time is a new experience to me. Playing with scenarios is a new experience to me. And playing with France is something I've done, but it's like I probably played about 8 games of France compared to the 40 games of Sweden and 40 games of Brandenburg Prussia. So yeah, so some of it is just that, and I don't know, playing digitally, we could do a whole episode on playing digitally, because even though it is functionally the same game, I feel like mentally it might cause some slip-ups because you're not tracking things. You're not tracking things, you're not paying as much attention necessarily to things that need to be paid attention to. When I play in paper, I have the adversary card right next to me, and every turn every invader phase, I check it, I scan it up and down, and I look at it, and that's why I'm making those little cheat sheets for each stage at each level, because it's a little bit more annoying to play like that, but it is technically better so that A, you don't make a mistake, and B, you don't lose because of it or whatever. I'm sorry if I let down anyone that was super built up and ready for some positive opinions or some in-depth analysis, but I just don't really have that, unfortunately.
I mean, this was very much just trying to get you to expose to a new aspect of the game and see what you thought. And honestly, I do not think that Spirit Island is purely perfect in every way in every aspect, shall we say. There are things that are not going to work and that are not going to work for specific people.
I don't think that every element of the game is for everyone, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
I mean, there is definitely some spirits that I'm not going to say I'm never going to touch. I'd like to try all of them at some point, but there's some spirits that I'm sure after trying, I'm just never going to really want to play again. So, okay.
Any other closing thoughts, or?
Well, my recording stopped for a few minutes in there. I have the backup audio, so if the audio sounds weird, everyone, I am so sorry. That's
all right. Well, thank you all for listening, regardless.
There's my warning. All right, bye everyone. Sorry.
Yeah, take care, and we'd love to hear from you. We're on Reddit, we're on Discord, we're on YouTube.
Suggest us some other scenarios to try.
Yeah, if anyone has ideas of scenario combinations, or they like one of the ones that I didn't list in the 5 here, please let us know.
Yeah, and I'm sure Kalen's will be in the description if you want to try them yourself.
Yes.
All right, bye everyone.